welcome back to the Frontline live stream. This week we're going to recognize a few more from our senior class, as well as we have several students who took the time to make video testimonials and sent them in, and they'll be mixed in throughout the message tonight. And I'd like to ask you, if that's a blessing to you and you enjoy hearing from them, take a moment and let them know that. Whether it's sharing a comment or if you know them personally, send them a message and thank them for doing so. For me, it doesn't get any better than hearing students talking about their faith. So tonight we're going to be in John chapter 15 as well as Luke chapter 8. So feel free to turn there as we take a moment to recognize a few from our senior class. 3 seniors who I'd like to recognize tonight are Caitlin Kuhn, Duke Waxberg, and Kelsey Erickson. First, we'll start with Caitlin. When I think of Caitlin, I think of someone who is consistent. For many years, she's made youth group a priority in her life. She's a student who time and time again has gone out of her way to check on me, to ask how I'm doing. She's always eager to share about her life and has a willingness to take advice and direction. Caitlin is an exceptionally hard worker, and I'm very excited to see where God is going to lead her next. Duke Waxberg. Duke is a guy that knows how to make people smile. I'm so grateful to share so many adventures with him over the years. Duke, you've always been able to take a joke as well as to give one, and you've brought a lot of people joy because of that. Every Wednesday night, I know I'll see Duke at youth group. He's always shown me the utmost respect, and I'll miss him more than he knows. Kelsey Erickson. If I've learned anything about Kelsey in the last 6 years, is that she's an incredible friend. She's thoughtful, loyal, and caring. Kelsey, you've grown in your faith in remarkable ways the last 6 years. I'll forever be grateful for the leadership role you took as a senior during our mission trip to SLAM last summer. You've been a true testimony for Jesus. It's been a joy to have been both your youth pastor and your friend.
The whole Bible is about Jesus. In fact, anytime we go to church, we hear a message, we open the Bible up and read it for ourselves, we can expect to find Jesus. In fact, it's fair to ask anytime we hear a message, what does this have to do with Jesus? Because the whole Bible, the whole storyline is all about him. Now, over the next few weeks, I want to look at what it means to encounter Christ. Tonight, we're going to start by looking at people who actually physically encountered Jesus during his time here on earth. And the encounters are numerous. There's many of them. I mean, there's the time that he met a woman by a well. He told her things about her life that she hadn't told people before. There's a time when he met Zacchaeus as he was hiding up in a tree waiting for Jesus to come. There's all kinds of instances where Jesus meets people, but how does he treat them in these times? How does he actually interact with them? Because Jesus makes it clear he didn't come to have servants. He didn't come to be served. In fact, he came to serve. He says the greatest among you, referring to himself, is truly the servant of all. So tonight I want to consider, what does it look like when we encounter the servant of all? In fact, Jesus moves on to even say, not only did he not come to have servants, but he refers to the disciples and his followers as his friends. So tonight I asked Grayson Johnson if he'd read from John chapter 15.
As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remained in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command: love each other.
If there's one thing that's a great big deal to teenagers, it's their friendships. You think of how many decisions are influenced directly because of our friendships. I mean, when it comes to deciding where we're going to go and what we're going to do, we often ask, which of my friends are going to be there? When it comes to playing a sport, we often ask, I wonder which one of my friends are going to be playing it. Even some of our classes and which ones we take, I wonder who else is going to be in them. Our friendships are a great big deal. But the truth is, all of us, no matter what the scenario is, no matter what the case is, we know what it's like to struggle within our friendships. Now, some people struggle with their friendships because they see themselves as a loner. They see themselves as somebody who's not desirable to be around. There's other people who may appear to be a part of a group, but when asked, they really don't actually feel like they're truly a part of it. Then there's also those who feel like they have all kinds of friends. And it appears that they're very popular, that they have just a incredible testimony, if you will. However, sometimes those people can be the most lonely of all. See, you know what I'm talking about because you know the struggles that come with friendships. Now, in a friend, really what we're looking for is someone who will listen to the story of our life. When I think about it, we're all like a radio station to a degree. We're all putting out our own signal, hoping that somebody just happens to tune in to find it and is willing to listen and to care. In fact, I would say we're almost like old-time radio stations or transmitters. A big box has a crank on it, and you have to work and work and work to get that signal out. You think about the things that we use today to crank that thing, to get ourselves out there, to hope people will listen. For some of us, it's social media. Other people, it's the extracurriculars that we involve ourselves in. Yet, even for other people, it's just the influences of those around us that we can guide and change our decisions, almost like peer pressure, if you will. But we want people to tune in and listen to our story. And sometimes we come to the realization that it feels like nobody's listening. It feels like nobody cares to hear it. You know, in times like this, I mean, think about so many of us we're isolated off from each other. We're not able to get out and interact. And these kinds of feelings can really start to set in. I wonder if people care. I wonder if anybody's really listening. I wonder if there's anybody who really cares to hear about what's going on in my life. Well, let me tell you, there is one person who's always interested in what's going on in your life. There's one person who's always tuned into your signal and who's listening and who's caring. Of course, I'm talking about Jesus. Now, tonight, I asked several students if they'd be willing to share about a time when they felt that Jesus encouraged them through a challenging time, or perhaps maybe when he used someone to encourage them during a challenging time. Here's the first couple of testimonies.
Hey guys, it's Kenzie. The question Joe asked me to answer for him was, how has Jesus comforted you in a difficult time? And I thought of two areas in my life where Jesus has been there and been a really big comfort when things have been a little tough. So the first area is with my friends. When I was 13, I basically had no friends, and it was really tough to find anyone who really cared. I mean, obviously I had my mom, but there was nobody I could really talk to, and Jesus was there for me. I knew that he would always be there to listen. I knew he would love me no matter what stupid thing I did, whatever choices I made. I knew that he would be there, that he would love me, that he'd listen and care. And that was one of the biggest areas that Jesus was a comfort to me in my life. The other area is with some of my extended family. There have been some struggles, especially with one of my cousins who has been really close. He has struggled with some addictions, and it's been really tough for me to watch him go through all of that stuff because he's really close to me. And it's been a comfort to have Jesus there by my side, and by knowing that he's by his side, and knowing that Jesus loves him even more than I do, and that he has a plan for him, and that he has everything under control. So just being able to give all of my worries to Jesus and trust that he can take care of everything, that's been a really big area where he's been a comfort to me when I feel like everything is just flying out of control. And it's been, I don't know how I would get through watching all of that happen without knowing that I had Jesus that I could give all my cares to. So that's just a quick little bit about where Jesus has been a comfort to me. There are other areas obviously as well, but those are kind of the two main ones. Anyway, I miss you guys a lot. I hope we can get back together soon. This whole coronavirus hopefully will die down. Hope you guys are staying healthy and doing well and not dying from boredom during quarantine.
Hi, my name is Stella, and Joe has asked me to answer this question. How has someone encouraged you in your faith? My answer would be, God has put many people in my life to encourage me in my faith, doing things such as sharing uplifting stories that really speak to my heart, and also sharing Bible verses that are really good. And I actually found one that I liked. So this is 1 Corinthians 2:6. Yet when we are among the full-grown, spiritually mature Christians who are ripe in understanding, we do impart a higher wisdom, the knowledge of the divine plan previously hidden.
As Grayson read a little earlier, Jesus didn't call us to just be his servants. He called us to be his friends. So what does friendship with Jesus actually look like? Well, I want to talk about that tonight because friendship with Jesus starts with him initiating the friendship. In John 15, verse 16, Jesus says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." He's saying, I took the initiative. I'm the one that started pursuing you. Now, there's a really good, secure feeling in being the one who's pursued. I mean, it's good and it feels right to have people come and chase us and to pursue us for the sake of relationship. Now, some of you might identify with this more than others, but for most of my life, I would tell you, through my childhood, through my teenage years, into college and beyond, often it's me who does all of the initiating. It feels like it's me who's the first to pick up the phone, to call people, to ask them to do things. It feels like you're always in pursuit. And I'll tell you, even by way of what I do as a youth pastor, there's a lot of pursuit that goes on that. Beyond that, it's like sometimes you feel like you're pursuing people that don't even want you to be pursuing them. And it can become really defeating, it can become challenging. It feels like you're doing your best to reach people, but nobody's really interested back in you. And that's a lie that we start to actually believe. I'll tell you, as I've gotten older, as I've grown in my faith, I've learned that it's actually a joy to pursue people. I've actually really enjoyed stopping and tuning into other people's station, listening to their message first. And that's been a huge blessing to me. Now, nobody is better at tuning into people's station and listening to them than Jesus. And so what does friendship look like with Jesus? Well, I'm going to turn to Luke chapter 8. So last week we were also in Luke chapter 8. We were talking about the parable of the sower. And what happens right after that is finished is Jesus goes across the sea. He calms the storm, for those who would know that story. And then he arrives, and this is the first thing that happens. And I asked Jonesy if he'd read this story for us.
Luke 8:26 through 39. Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him.
We read this story, and you have to think, what an example of Jesus seeking people out. I mean, after all, this guy is walking around in the tombs. He lives in a cemetery. Now, I want to tell you right now, we have more in common with this man whom Jesus encounters than we probably realize at first glance. Luke takes the time to tell us exactly where Jesus is. And the reason he does that is he wants us to understand that Jesus goes to a region that he's not from. And he starts interacting with a people that aren't like the ones he grew up with, people who have different beliefs. And the people that Jesus would have grown up with would have found this place and these people to be very unclean. Of course, this is an unclean place. Jesus is walking around in tombs. He's talking to possessed people. And according to the scripture, there's a pigsty that's not too far away. I mean, this is a very unclean space, both physically and spiritually speaking. Now, the condition of this man as Jesus finds him, he's naked. He has no home. He's living in the local cemetery. I mean, imagine if we had someone like that who lived in our town. I mean, everybody would know of them. I mean, the reputation would precede them. I mean, he's a castaway. If you want to do anything in this world, you need clothes, you need food, you need money, and you need identification. And this guy has none of them. What he's really been reduced to is like the likes of a wild beast, one that's completely out of control. His life was truly hopeless. I mean, if he came and he sat next to you on the bus or at a restaurant, the first thing you'd do is get up and move. Rightfully so. Now, I made mention just a moment ago that we have more in common with this man than we realize. You see, the truth is, he represents something for us. The first thing that I feel he really represents is an example of what our lives look like alienated from God. Not necessarily externally, but especially internally. I mean, when we're made in the image of God, and we live under the influence of evil, there's this division that's within each one of us. You see, there's no area of our life that's unaffected by sin. Our mind is affected by sin. Our will is affected by sin. I mean, sin takes a grip and it controls our lives. Last week we talked about it not having control, or 2 weeks ago. Here is a man who's completely out of control. But let me tell you, sin doesn't just alienate us from God, it alienates us from ourselves. I said it last week, and as it pertains to the hard heart, the hard soil, really what happens is it causes division within us. Sin separates us not only from God, but it separates ourselves by way of dividing us. Now, this encounter, I mean, this is a confliction that exists within this man that's true for each one of us. He, one, is attracted to Jesus, but two, he's fearful of Jesus. We may have this more in common with this man than we realize. I see it frequently of students when they come to youth group. For a lot of students, not all of them, but for a lot of them, there's an initial attraction. They walk in and they have never seen a church that has so many couches in the basement. They know a lot of the people that are here. Relationships are made and developed. They get to know their small group leader. Oftentimes I get to know them a bit. There's an attraction to it. They might hear the word. They might hear a story, something that resonates with them, and there's an interest. But you know what there also is? There's a fear. There's a fear of committing to Christ. There's a fear of having to change their life in a way that represents what it truly means to follow. There's a fear of beginning to follow, only to fall away. You know, somewhere along the line, people got it in their heads that my life is mine to do with as I please, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make me happy, as if that's the purpose of life. You know, if that's your mindset, you're going to live a very lonely and divided existence within yourself. You will always be divided with that mindset because you will always come to challenges that you don't have the answers to. So once again, I asked some students, how has Jesus encouraged you and helped you through a trying circumstance?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's JJ. I'm going to be answering, how has Jesus comforted you during a difficult time? So since I was a little boy, I've always been scared of the dentist. So my parents taught me a verse, Psalm 56:3, that says, "What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee." And that verse has helped me a lot recently with the whole coronavirus pandemic and the fear of the unknown. And God's been really comforting me to see the bright side of this whole situation, and that I get to spend a lot more time with my family than I ever would have before college. And also, I was reading something with my mom the other day that really resonated with me that said, the presence of problems doesn't mean the absence of God. So just knowing that he's here even through all the uncertainty and worry is super comforting as well. So yeah, that's my answer.
Hi, my name's Sylvia, and I got asked to answer the question how Jesus has comforted me through a difficult time. So although right now may be a really difficult time, I'm going to talk about a time a little over a year ago when I was struggling. The Lord actually really spoke to me through a conversation I had with Joe, and it has just been a really big blessing to me. So before that conversation, I was struggling with who I was and what my purpose was and where I was at in my life and where I wanted to go, I guess. After that conversation, though, it was really clear to me that the Lord was reassuring me of his promises and his strength and his comfort, and that he has a plan for me. And that was really comforting to me because, like I said before, I kind of felt lost and stuck, and it was just a huge eye-opener. And I think that the guilt that I felt through that conversation was what Jesus knew I needed to open up my eyes and see that he was right there all along. And I think that's just a huge blessing. And he has continually shown me his comfort and strength and guidance. And I have dramatically grown in my faith since then. And I encourage all of you to trust in the Lord and lean on him, even though things may be difficult, or no matter what you may be struggling with, because he is the answer to everything, and he has all the answers to everything. So that's just a time in my life where the Lord has given me comfort.
So there's an attraction and there's a fear. Now you think of the fear that the disciples even had of Jesus after he calms the seas. They asked, who is this guy who can do this? The same thing is about to be asked. Who is this man who can cast out demons? There's a fear of him. In fact, when this man, this possessed man, says when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" I mean, it's incredible how even the demons recognize him and know his power, and they're fearful of him. Don't send us into the abyss. They know their fate. What happens is they're confronted with the Almighty. They're confronted with the judge. And what they do is they beg him to simply delay their destiny. But in all of this talk, you think about demons and possession in this whole thing, and it's creepy and it's unsettling. But how much more unsettling is it that there is a place that even these demonic figures, these spirits, are afraid to go to? But in all of this, we can't forget the man. We're concerned with this encounter of Jesus and this man, because he has a truly hopeless existence. It's written here that when the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down a steep bank into the lake, and they drowned. And for those of you who love pigs, this isn't a good story for you. In fact, I remember in college, a girl, when we were going through this story, talked about why in the world did God decide to allow the animals to be possessed? Why in the world did God allow that to happen? I mean, why did he allow the animals to be possessed? Why are people possessed? Why did that happen this way? I mean, it's been thought that what happened when the demons went into the pigs, that the demons did what they did, ran off and drowned the pigs as a way to cause a further problem for Jesus, to cause a stir, to cause the community to be very unsettled. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, clearly this man has a power that can't be explained. And so the people come from town, they hear about it, they come from town, they come out to see him, and they approach him, and they find Jesus, and they find this possessed man now in his right mind. And they're shooken, completely upset about it. They were terrified of him, and they asked him to leave. See, the impact of the gospel in one's life isn't always met with positivity. I mean, did you get that? The impact of the gospel in one's life is not always met with positivity. There's been students who have left a Wednesday night youth group having made a commitment to Jesus to go home, and in the coming days, they're made fun of by their family for the faith they found in Jesus. There's been students who have gone on retreats and mission trips and opportunities, made commitments to Jesus, only to be alienated by their friends for doing so. The impact of the gospel in one's life is not always met with positivity. I mean, you read this story and you're half expecting the town and these people to come out and to just be in awe of it all, and to just fall down and start worshiping, and to start listening and asking, what do I need to do in order to believe? But that's not what happens at all. They're completely shaken all the way to their core. They want this radical person out of their region. You see, men and women by nature don't seek God. They run from God. It's Christ who seeks out people. It's Christ who found this man. I mean, you read the story and you ask yourself, who was looking for who here? It's quite obvious. But my question tonight is, how about you? Has Jesus found you? And when he found you, did you refuse him? I mean, when he found you, did it go back to last week? Was your heart like the second or the third type of soil? Interested for a bit, only to let it fall aside. Only to let the other areas of life just choke out that enthusiasm for it. Let me tell you something about Jesus. He's a friend who never stops looking for you. Jesus is always listening. He's always tuned into your station, hearing what you're putting out. Again, another testimony from a student.
So, I'm Olivia, as most of you know. I want to talk about one way that Jesus encouraged me through a difficult time of my life. And it was when I went through a lot of anxiety, elementary school through junior high. And I had terrible, terrible anxiety. It was an awful feeling, and I felt very alone during that time. And I remember praying all the time, and I would pray all night long, even if I couldn't sleep. And I wrote prayer journals, and I felt like my prayers were never being answered sometimes, but it didn't stop me from praying. And finally, one day, I was at a Sunday church service, and during the music at the church I used to go to, I actually felt like this undescribable feeling of when I just felt God's presence, and I had bursted into tears crying, and I had to sit down, and it was probably one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. And from that day on, my anxiety got a lot better and a lot more controlled. And doesn't mean I still struggle from time to time, but remaining faithful and sticking through prayers, even when they may not seem like they're being answered, it really paid off, and it still does today.
So the first part about friendship with Jesus is that he initiates it. The second part about friendship with Jesus is that he requires an intimacy. He requires a closeness in that friendship. Back in John 15, he says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I've made known to you. I was thinking about the story of Cinderella. Okay, I haven't watched that movie in probably 15 years. And it popped into my head. I saw a commercial for it, and I thought, what a perfect example of this. Because if you remember, I mean, she really becomes, even though she's a family member, to the stepmother and stepsisters, I mean, she becomes a slave. They're not interested in what she has to say. They're completely disinterested in her. They're really only concerned with, do as I say. But you remember, her sisters go off to the ball, and she's left there. She's devastated. She's brokenhearted. And who comes and helps her make that dress? Her friends. Before long, they're singing and dancing mice. There's flying birds. They're putting together this huge display of affection for Cinderella. And of course they are. Because she's involved them in her life. She's stopped and she's taken an interest in them. She's taken time for them, and they love her for it. You see, when there's initiative, and when we find security in a friendship, intimacy needs to follow. You see, intimacy happens when we purposefully involve others in our lives in meaningful ways. You see, intimacy and closeness happens in our lives when we purposefully involve others in our lives in meaningful ways. I mean, Jesus could just say, do as I say. He could treat us like servants, like slaves, but that's not at all what he does. He treats us like a friend. He says, follow as I lead. Do as I do. You see, Jesus wants an intimate friendship, relationship with you. He wants a closeness with you. He's not sitting in heaven with a checklist saying, they did this and they did this, they didn't do that. No, what he's doing is he's praying for you. He's tuned into your signal. He's listening. He's pursuing you. When he looks into the eyes of his disciples, he doesn't see them as servants. He calls them his friend. And this story has such an interesting ending. I mean, this man whom the demons have been cast out of is freed from the possession. He's free from his sin. And it says that he wants to follow Jesus, and that Jesus tells him to go to his town and to share what's been done for him, and he does so. In fact, his obedience marks his care and his love for Jesus. I mean, Jesus says, if you keep my commands, you remain in my love. I mean, obedience to Jesus and his word is truly the test of how intimate and how close our relationship with him really and truly is. You see, there's an old saying that people want the rewards of friendship, but not the hassles of friendship. The same way that people want the rewards of heaven, but not the hassles of Christianity. Let me tell you, there's an act of death in every friendship. I mean, this fear of change, this fear of giving things up. In every friendship you will ever have, there will be opportunities, there will be situations where you just have to stop and have this act of death, so to speak. What I mean by that is there's going to be times in friendships where you have to just concede things to be a loss by way of keeping the friendship. There are times where you got to give things up in order to make the friendship work. There's times you got to take a lesser role to make something important for your friend take place. There are times you deprive yourself of something that might be important for you just to seek the better situation of a friend. You see, those who are unwilling to do this are the ones that won't have many friends. All you'll have is just mere acquaintances. There'll be no intimacy involved in any of it. Jesus says, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. See, the fullness of Christ's love comes about when he goes and he dies on the cross for all people, but not all people, his friends. I mean, this is extraordinary because most people see themselves as unlovable. People, when they look inward at their heart, and they're initially attracted and fear takes over. That fear happens because they see themselves as unlovable. I've made these mistakes. I have these challenges in front of me. I don't see myself as lovable. And you're telling me that not only am I lovable, but I'm supposed to have these acts of death, these acts of love for other people? I mean, what we're asking here is for someone who sees themselves as unlovable to love other people who see themselves as unlovable. Well, that's craziness. Well, it's craziness until you know Jesus Christ. Because in Jesus, you are lovable. And it's Christ in you who helps you love those who see themselves as unlovable. Because Christ is in my life, his presence in my life allows me to love other people. And this story ends in a very, very strange way, if you ask me, at least at first glance. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with Jesus, but Jesus sent him away. Return home. Tell everyone what God has done for you. The man went away, told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. I mean, Jesus, I want to go with you. No, you're not going to come with us. But I believe, Jesus. I want to follow. No, you're going to stay here. I mean, have you ever had plans to do something and think that what you have in mind is exactly the thing that you need to be doing, but only God steps in and almost changes the circumstances so you can't? I mean, I feel like most times in my life, the plans I've created for myself are the very things that didn't even come to fruition. I mean, what this man felt was just freedom from the possession and freedom from sin. He's secure now in his salvation. And he says, I want to go with you, Jesus. Of course he does. He owes him his life. And it seems harsh that Jesus looks at him and says, no, you're not coming with me. You're going to stay here. But see, Jesus sees something that this man can't see. I mean, Jesus is being sent out of the region. He's being kicked out. And if this man whom he's healed comes with him, who's here to teach the town about the good news of Jesus? Who's there to share the gospel? I mean, these people are terrified of who Jesus is, but they do know this man, and they can see there's been a change. What a testimony. But what an incredible testimony that the man is obedient. You know, there's people watching right now. They're dealing with their own forms of possession or oppression. There's some who are neglected within their families. There's some who are verbally and socially abused by their peers. There's some who have never known what it feels like to be free from the chains of sin. You see, something the Bible doesn't record is how this man felt when Jesus said, no, you need to stay. It shares that he's obedient, but he could have thought, well, what if those demons come back? What if nobody in town is interested in what I have to share with them? Will I ever be back and involved in a normal way in society? All of those fears, all of those thoughts, it's the exact same kind of thoughts and fears that prevent people from following Jesus. These are the very thoughts that make wayward believers drift even further away. The text says the man went away and he told all over town what Jesus had done for him. Here's your application for tonight. I mean, is there anything more important you can do with your life than to share with other people what Jesus has done for you? You see, a friend, a true friend, is concerned for where their other friends stand before Jesus. And I have students from time to time come and ask me, how do I share my faith? How do I talk about my faith? It's as simple as this. It's also challenging. But this man models it for us. Share what Jesus has done for you. You may think, well, my friends aren't interested in God. Well, if your friend is truly a friend, if they're tuned into your station and they're listening, they care, then they'll listen to what Jesus has done for you. The second thing, last point of application. So I want you to answer the question, what kind of a friend am I? What kind of a friend am I? Do you search other people out? Or do you just expect to be pursued? I mean, are you willing to die on certain things for the betterment of your friendships? Are you willing to move past things that can hinder friendships? Or will you be stubborn? And rather than let a friendship become intimate, just let it be an acquaintance. Is there any intimacy? Is there any depth in your friendships? One last one. Is there an intimacy in your friendship with Jesus? Is there an intimacy in your friendship with Jesus? When the possessed man comes to Jesus, he says, what do you want from me? Jesus wanted the man to be free from his sin. Jesus wanted to be the man's friend. And Jesus wants the same thing for each one of us.